everyone, this is Christy Strickler for Get It Scrapped. In this video we'll be talking about scrapbooking ideas for telling stories about camping. Camping's a popular summer vacation activity for some of us, and today we're going to share several samples that our creative team has made for us with wonderful ideas for documenting those camping trips. When you're documenting camping, probably the most obvious place to go is something familiar, like using a camping motif. And that's what Heather Awesome has done on her layout. She says, "This page documents a camping trip I made with friends and our dogs in 2014 to Sani Pass, where we hiked to the highest point south of Mount Kilimanjaro and drove down the pass. To tell my story, I used a bold pattern paper with a camping motif as my background across the 2-page spread. I also used pictures from the trip that documented everyone on the trip, the scenery, and the details of where we stayed." So she's done a few things here. She does have that traditional camping motif, and those types of patterns often have the same thing, something with tents or motorhomes, canoes, trees, critters, and they all tend to have this muted color palette. And it's not a bad palette, it just feels to me a little more kind of matte. It's not bright. You can kind of see it in the cars. They have a yellow canoe, it's a green car. There's trucks pulling a motorhome, and they have that kind of orange and marigold yellow color, and probably a few browns with the bear and the deer. A few colors are a little brighter. You have that hint of blue. And I think that it's wonderful that Heather has pulled that blue out and used that brighter blue to highlight her photos. She's matted her photos and title. It makes them a bright, energetic centerpiece. So when you're working with something traditional, consider how you can make it contrast, how you can make it brighter. And then sometimes with those camping motifs, the patterns can be busier. In this case, it keeps that energy, but by matting the photo with that blue color, it also brings the focus to the photos instead of the busy camping pattern paper. I also want to point out what a wonderful job she's done with the title, that who, what, where, when, and why, and the way that she's used the vellum pieces across it with the enamel dots. This is a wonderful title treatment, and you could do something similar with other travel photos. Just substitute in a more themed motif for whatever city or place you're visiting on holiday. If you don't have something with a traditional camping motif in your scrapbook stash, don't worry about it, because you can do something different, as we're going to see on the next layout. You can go to natural motifs and textures. And by natural motifs, I'm talking about leaves and flowers, trees, small animals if you have them. And by texture, I'm talking about things like burlap, wood grain, things that you might associate with being used outdoors. This particular layout is by Gretchen Heninger, and she says, "We went camping often when I was a child. While we have many wonderful memories, we have very few photos, but here is one. Because of the poor quality of the photo, I kept it small and drew focus to it by surrounding it with embellishments. I used wood grain and florals to emphasize the outdoor theme. I planned for space on the canvas for journaling that captures some of my favorite memories from our favorite campsite." So she's done, again, a wonderful idea of layering and blending. So if you're going to use these natural motifs and textures, this is a great opportunity for you to practice your layering on your scrapbook pages. And she's used a nice contrast between that brown and the blue. And you're going to see that's a very good combination often on these camping layouts. They do a great job of kind of contrasting each other while still staying very natural feeling. On these next two layouts, we're also going to stray away from the camping motif. Instead, we're going to use maps. And you're also going to see the continued use of similar colors. Instead of the brown, though, with the blue, this time we're going to have green with cream and blue, and both continue to work equally as well in capturing outdoor layouts. This first layout is by Christensen, and she says, This layout is a page from a mini album about backpacking and camping with my husband. I decided beforehand to do an album on the topic and documented the weeks of planning it took and then every detail of the trip. This is the story of what happened at the trailhead before the 4-mile hike up to the mountain camp. I didn't use any product to drive the feel and composition of the page. I simply used a map screenshot of the terrain we hiked as my background paper and photos to highlight both the scenery and the actual place we were in. So Summer's layout is a digital one, but this is still something you could do if you're a paper scrapbooker. You can go online to the area in which you plan to camp or hike and get a photo of it to use somewhere as an embellishment or as pattern paper on your scrapbook page. Our second map layout is by Mariepierre Capistran, and she's also taken a map and printed it out for use on her scrapbook page. She says, "This page will be the opening page of my honeymoon album. We went camping for 4 weeks in the national parks of the USA. The important part of my storytelling is the journaling, since this page is just the introduction to a whole album on the subject. I created a small resume of the trip, stating that I thought that 4 weeks was a very long time for a camping trip. I am not a fan of camping. I used a single photo to represent the whole trip and printed it in a large format to make a stunning first impression. When I went on my trip in 2001, I had an APS camera that was taking 3 strange photo formats. One was a panorama, one not as wide but a little bit wider than the normal 4x6, and the third one almost 4x6 in size. The photo I took for this page was the second type of format, and I played with the fact that the photo is very wide. On the left side, I printed a map to show all of our stops. On the map itself are a lot of the little geotags. She's kind of put places where they spent time camping, and a geotag is another wonderful motif to incorporate into your camping layouts, especially if you're going to print a map, but you can use them in embellishment layers as well. Another motif worth mentioning here is the burst or sunburst motif, and you can kind of see it peeking out of the pattern paper. It's in the layer underneath the photo on the right side. This type of motif reminds us of the outdoors because of the sun. It's a great flat element usually, so you can add it in stitching or pin into your layout or even cut little pieces of pattern paper. I also love that she's used a larger format of photo. 4x6 is pretty standard, and it's what most people shoot with either their camera phones or with their regular DSLR, but many cameras now have apps or a panorama option. And there's so many beautiful landscapes out there when we go hiking, when we go camping, that it would be great for contrast in your albums to have these stunning, larger panorama-sized photos. So far, the layouts that we've seen have all had a sort of traditional blocked or grid design feel for the most part. This next layout breaks away from that and uses a pie chart style template. So if you want to break away and kind of do something different than a traditional camping style layout, trying an unusual sketch or template is the perfect answer. Amy Kingsford says, "This page is about the camping trip my husband and I took to celebrate finding out that we were pregnant with our first child. We made Dutch oven dinners for the first time. We talked about baby names, and we even met a couple that was camping with their 1-month-old baby. Unfortunately, they had to leave a couple hours after they set up because the baby was very fussy. I think this opened our eyes a little bit to the changes that were coming, but we didn't let it ruin our celebration. The pastel camping themed kit by Jennifer Persett was perfect for my camping stories softer subject. I used a pie slice style template, replacing one of the slices with a tent embellishment. The remaining slices hold photos and fun patterns." I love that she's used an unusual template to tell her story. Also of note here are some other motifs that could traditionally be used on a camping themed layout. The feathers, the arrows. She also has wood grain texture and flowers, which we mentioned before, but she's also substituted some items in place of what you would usually expect. Like, for example, she's got the doily in place of the sun in the clouds. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of play with the supplies you have on hand to use them in a camping themed page. This last layout is made by Debbie Hodge, and she says, "This page highlights the idea that the only vacations I knew as a child were camping trips, while my own children have never gone camping. I've had this photo of my brother and myself in front of our pop-up camper for a while and have wanted to scrapbook it. I do have other stories I want to tell, of how we shared the camper and the equipment with my uncle's family, and of incidents and stories that I remember and about the site itself, so I'll probably have to use this photo again. Here the story is told with a layered foundation and a busy cluster of themed embellishments. And that's what I really want to call your attention to on this particular page. She's made a very simple but striking foundation by layering those pattern papers up. And while nothing specifically in the pattern paper has a camping motif, it feels very natural. It has several floral prints, and that blue print with the sort of dotted stripe reminds me of raindrops. And I know it's not raining in this picture, but for me that just helps kind of add to the natural feel of the page. There's also a couple of other textures here that lend to the page feeling very natural. You have the wood grain, and you also have the sprig of the pine bough, and you have the twine. Twine is an excellent, inexpensive, if you're a paper scrapbooker, supply that can help accent those camping pages. And she also has that one die cut of the tree just below that sprig of pine. It might not be a Christmas tree, but it could be. Used here, I don't think of it as a Christmas tree, and there's no ornaments or anything on it. But seeing it here makes me think about all those Christmas tree shaped die cuts I have in my supplies that I could possibly slip into my nature camping style pages. So take a look through your supplies and rethink them in different ways. Do they fit in with a motif or a texture that can accent your camping layout? You don't necessarily have to have a specific camping motif. We've seen a lot of examples from our creative team of layouts that would give you ideas to scrapbook your camping trips. Keep in mind that motifs are wonderful. You can use something very obvious, but you can also look through your supplies to find hidden gems that are perfect for documenting the page. It's about the combination of the color, the texture, and the pattern that will help you tell your story. These layouts originally appeared in an article on the Get It Scrapped blog. We'll link up to that for you. And to find more inspiration, head to getitscrapped.com/blog.